Reddit ask me anything. I'm a white male who just got out of 8 months in Chinese prison. Ask me anything. I'm not going to give away any key information linked to my IRL identity or of the other people involved. I'd also rather not get into political debates about anything China related except where it has relevance to my case. I'll answer about literally anything else you might be interested in about Chinese law, conditions in Chinese prison, the court system, our case, trial, deportation, etc. Did your respective embassy get involved? And how useful were they? Were you deported after your jail term? What's the daily routine in jail? How many to a cell? Good questions. Sorry for the delay in responding. About the embassy. The embassy did get involved 9 days after I got arrested and a week after we were put in the detention center. I was told to expect a visit from the embassy on the final day of the week. They then came, a full 2 weeks after I was incarcerated, for a 30-minute visit, and came back monthly, a minimum of 30 days apart, for a total of 6 more, 7 visits. They had been alerted by one of my former colleagues to our situation. The other guy in the same case as me is from the same nation as me, so they would come to visit first me and then him at the same time. Usually from around 10:30 11:15. We always managed to overrun by a few minutes. I felt bad for the other guy because his meeting obviously ran over into lunchtime, so he would have had less time to nap before the afternoon alarm sounded. They were very useful in some ways and completely useless in others, but their hands were tied by the bureaucracy and the slow rate at which things worked. The first time they came was an utterly horrible experience, like being booted in the balls over and over for 30 minutes straight. A relentless stream of horrible information I had not yet been told or realized the full ramifications of just dumped on me. You've lost your job. Obviously, this process will take a minimum of 6 months and possibly a year and a half. You can't see anyone from the outside world in that time. When it's done, you will be immediately deported and you will likely never be able to return. Your girlfriend is stuck in here too, but for you, she would be eligible for bail. But because the case involves foreigners, nobody can get bail except in very special circumstances involving serious illness or Chinese spouses' children. You will have to pay a large court fine and pay for your own deportation. The prison has no English books, and whilst we brought you along some books, they have been refused because the prison needs to check if there haven't been any secret messages written in them to you, and nobody can read English, so they can't check. Similarly, all of the letters I had panickedly sent in the first 2 weeks of sitting in that prison had not only not been sent, they had not yet left my reporting officer's desk, as nobody who spoke English to vet them had been found. This meant my request for a lawyer had not been sent, and also my parents had not been informed and were still expecting me to land back in my home country for the Christmas vacation in a few days' time. I had to decide, there and then, what I could ask a consular official in the UK to call my parents and tell them. Since your crime involves drugs, it's highly possible that you will end up with a criminal record in your home country because of this. So you can kiss goodbye to ever teaching again in your home country or abroad. Thank God this turned out not to be true, since there is no equivalent crime in any Western country's laws. They began trying to tell me about what the crime I had been accused of was, and what the process of being convicted or guideline sentence might be, but were repeatedly cut off by an alarmed prison official insisting that they were not allowed to discuss the specifics of my case. I was desperate to hear some information, not about my own case but just about the crime I was accused of, and so many times I had asked questions in the police interviews, only to be told you must ask the embassy this. So I began to panic and wept, begging the officer to please allow them to tell me just what the crime I had been accused of meant, that I didn't even understand what I had done wrong. He relented, and they told me, which was the first time I realized that I was there not for any drug use of my own, but solely for the few times I had admitted my girlfriend friends had smoked in my house. I was absolutely crushed, because this was the first time also I realized this was information that they never had about us, that we surrendered willingly, not knowing it was a law. Why were you arrested? My girlfriend and I got arrested last winter outside our apartment complex. They had arranged a sting operation thing where someone pretended to be a mum trying to get her kid English lessons. My girlfriend was a teacher, like me. They actually only had a warrant and only knew about my girlfriend, but I tried to intervene when the man spoke to her forcefully and turned around to see two guys holding little GoPro style cameras with that state logo on them. After a very awkward drive to the police station, not handcuffed but also not as guests, they took her off to be questioned and kept me in a little side room. One guy told me during my waiting time through my mediocre Chinese and a translation app on his phone that they had found a spliff end with some of her DNA on it. She was Chinese and the modern Chinese ID card is a DNA record thing. They never told her this, and I have no way to verify it, but I can answer definitively that we were taken in under suspicion of smoking marijuana. We were then formally arrested after 37 days of detention, by this time with an official crime name attached, which means providing a place for / harboring other drugs users. This was the crime for which we were eventually sentenced 6 months later. How was the diversity of people in there? In the entire detention center, of over 1,500 people there were 2 other foreigners, the other guy in the case with me and my girlfriend and one guy from Nigeria. His story was really bleak. He got hit by a car and when the ambulance came to pick him up they tested him and found he had cocaine in his system. They then searched the bike he was riding and found a few grams of cocaine and he got taken in as soon as he was discharged from hospital. I didn't see any of these others inside the prison, including my girlfriend, for the whole time. The prison populace is 99% Chinese and that was my experience of it inside, being the anomaly, the panda, to be stared at. This was especially bad in the freshman cell where new people were arriving all the time, but not so bad in the second place once people got used to me. How were you treated? What were conditions like? Pretty broad questions but I guess I asked for it. I'll try to give a broad answer that sees to both. As a white person I definitely received preferential treatment from the policemen who came to do the interviews, the guards who ran the detention center and specifically the guard who ran our cell, and also by the other 20-ish cellmates. Over the course of my time in there I was in 3 different cells, 303, 301 and 309, but 301 and 309 were effectively the same one, all the same people, just moved down the corridor, because a guy in our room had gone into some kind of psychosis and kicked a hole in the ceramic squad toilet, cutting his foot open, so they had to bring in guys to fix it. 303 was a freshman cell that new arrivals were sent to. It was considerably more miserable than 301/9 as the cell bosses were real hardasses and always cracking down on the new recruits to follow the rules. Also there was a constant stream of drunk drivers coming in for 7 days and going home which made my ass then thinking I was guaranteed 6 months all the more miserable to watch them saunter in and out in a week. It was also crazily overcrowded, with my highest number in one room in there, 27. During the winter, this meant that in the one small room, there is a narrow corridor of 13 paces in the middle. I paced those 13 paces more than 10,000 times during night watch duty, and 2 wooden benches of about 10 paces on either side, the last bit of space being taken up by a squad toilet on each side, behind glass. This means that even accounting for the 2 people on night duty, one side has 12 and the other 13 big guys trying to sleep on blankets strewn out on a wooden board perhaps 8 meters long. You sleep shoulder to shoulder. At times I physically didn't have enough space to lie on my back and had to sleep spooning the guy beside me, the guy behind me snoring in my ear. This problem was exacerbated by the coaches in that cell spreading out a whole blanket width of bed as theirs at the end of the bench board thing furthest from the toilet, plus 2 other coaches' cronies. As the white guy, I was next in line, but this meant I actually slept on the edge of the communal blanket and mainly just on the board, and was directly underneath a big bright light. You sleep with the lights on. Other ways my privilege manifested being white benefited me were monthly visits from the embassy, where I was brought letters from my parents, and got a chance to speak English for 30 minutes. The officer in charge of my room would take me off to his office to chat to me in Chinese and sometimes give me bread or fruit, though this novelty dried up with time after initially having no access to English books. By the 6th month they relented and let the embassy bring books in the guise of Prisoners Abroad, a UK charity. Initially I got 1, then 2, then 3, and in the last month, 3 of my choice, plus a Sudoku puzzle book I asked for Ulysses, Gravity's Rainbow and Don Quixote. The longest and densest books I thought they'd let me have. People were always happy to speak to me in Chinese and try to teach me it and were patient with me, since we all had so much time on our hands, and the repercussions would be so severe if we didn't. I went in with mediocre, around HSK level 2, spoken Chinese and weaker still knowledge of the character, but I left effectively a fluent speaker, and my reading, typing and even handwriting. Drawbacks of my being white. On arrival I had no idea WTF was happening and had no translator throughout the process, which made it immensely more confusing than it might have been. Chinese PPL have a huge issue with the word "ugh." I was once pushed and another time whacked with a big hardback book on my naked back for mumbling the word under my breath to myself out of frustration and the other person thinking I had sworn at them. People also took offense to other cultural things like not always sharing food or not refusing food when it is offered to be shared with you. Still don't get that one. We probably got sent back and delayed an extra 2.5 months in the process due to the complexity of us being white. I only had one passable English speaker in the same cell as me, who was moved in with me after one day explicitly to be my translator, and he got moved away again after 4 months for no real reason, just a weird byproduct of my boss guy's desire to punish a different dude. I still made friends and my Chinese improved a lot, but it was unbelievably isolating and miserable, especially for the first 3 months or so when we had no English books at all. I could say so much more, but that seems like enough for now. Ask me anything. Is it inhumane? Nothing bad happened to me. I saw some pretty ducked up stuff. The guy smashing the ceramic toilet and slicing his foot open was the culmination of a 4-day spiral of craziness from him. He initially feigned illness, was taken to the hospital, believed and treated nicely, so he saw it as a route out and faked further, pretending he was having seizures, in tremendous pain, his legs not able to work, and a hacking fake cough like a dragon being sick, culminating in a little dainty spit every minute or so, which turned into howling out in animalistic agony every 30 seconds or so, for 2 entire days. Nobody got any sleep at all. I was actually on night duty the second night as he was flipping out and angrily told him in Chinese that I thought he was pretending. He rushed at me, his legs suddenly working, after I guided him over to the intercom to bother the irate guard to send the doctor for the 10th time in an hour, and I thought he was going to try to hit me, but instead he collapsed around my knees, clutching at my waist and whimpering, a totally pathetic image. I looked around at all my cellmates kind of smirking up at me, all unable to sleep, all kind of bonded together in this insane moment, as I kind of haltingly bent over and patted him on the head and told him it was okay, and I did believe him, really. Treating a 35-year-old man with a grade school education like my son. Bizarre. I also saw a guard with handcuffs, a guy left and right wrists to their left and right ankles, so he's hunched over forwards with butt sticking out like an SM position. Then paraded him up and down the corridor, apologizing to each individual cell in the room. We watched him stumble by, all stood in silent rows in the cell, also on punishment, though a less severe one. Why? Because during Spring Festival, he had been on holiday and come back to look at the cameras and see we had been speaking too much, and ankle handcuffs guy had dared to sit cross-legged on the bench, on as many as 3 different occasions, in order to talk to someone. Talking socializing is frowned upon. It was so ducked up. After screamed at us all, then took this one guy who he particularly hated away. We all stood as commanded in our row and whispers speculating what he might be doing to Li Yifei. None of us guessed what eventually happened. It was so dark to think that this kind of total human rights abuse was not only possible, but dished out over such a small offense, on a Monday morning. First day back after a vacation. Nothing I saw after that ever rivaled that in terms of displays of open cruelty from the guards. But I will never forget it. In my time in the room we had to do the fight argument self-harm procedure 8 times. 4 arguments, 2 fights, and 2 self-harms, both toilet kicking guy. None of the fights made it to punches even. If you argue you get really hammered with night duty. Maybe 15 days in a row of having to get up at 12:30 am and stand bleary-eyed making sure nobody covers their head with their blanket, all the way to 2:30, then try to sleep until 6:30, 2 sleeps of 4 hours maximum, horrible for your body clock, and maybe also having to do lunchtime duty as well. as no extra sleep from 12:32. If you made it all the way to a real fight where a punch was thrown, you would spend between a week and a month in leg irons. 24/7. A guy had a fight in a neighboring cell and got moved into ours. I watched with fascination as he peeled his underpants off under the chains to shower, then clanked his way to the shower, washed, then dried and laboriously pulled his pants and trousers back through the manacles. Hence I was lucky the guards, walking by every half hour and watching always on the cameras, missed the time the guy hit me with my book, since I'd likely have been hit with additional duties for initially provoking him. They are all about keeping harmony, so that means if you aren't harmonious, they will duck you up. There's so much more I can say, but that gives a cover of it. Were you actually guilty of this crime, or was it wrongful imprisonment? I absolutely was guilty of the crime. Many more times than I was convicted for it. Just 6 times, but it's the only country in the world where this crime exists. The crime is called providing a place for others to take drugs. It pertains only to other people doing drugs on a property owned or rented by you. The drugs don't have to be yours, and it doesn't matter at all which drugs they are, as long as they are an illegal classified substance, all judged the same, or even if you do the drugs or not. The only thing that matters is that the other people do them, and you own the place. It's actually historically an anti-opium den law. To be done just for smoking weed is a 15 days and done offense. My girlfriend could have gone back to work before Christmas, and while I would still have been deported, I wouldn't have been banned from coming back, as I have been told I have, for 10 years and perhaps to be denied a visa indefinitely. To smoke drugs yourself is purely an administrative penalty, not even technically a crime, and with no trial or court process. However, other more serious offenses such as mine, to let somebody else take drugs in your house, and trafficking, selling, making drugs were all criminal cases, which meant going into the Chinese legal system. A minimum of 5 months and perhaps years sat in detention waiting to get a court date. Also, if you are caught 3 times for a drugs offense, you get mandatory 2-year rehab camp even if it's just 3 times the 15 days offense. And after being caught once or twice, you have to submit to random and also organized testing. On the plus side, whilst they never even knew about me, and I confessed totally accidentally to the times I had confessed to and was eventually convicted of, I had in fact done this hundreds more times than I confessed to, and also done several far worse crimes whilst in China. I once calculated that if they knew of everything I had done, none of it theft or violence, all of it related to marijuana, MDMA or LSD, I could have received as many as 25 years. Due to China's insane 1-2 grams sold equals 1 year of sentence guidelines, and this being carried over across all drugs, with no classification system used. So to be real, 1 gram of weed equals 1 gram of meth or heroin. In the system, there is literally no distinction applied. If my friends had come over to my house and snorted cocaine or bath salts off my coffee table instead of hitting a pipe, my sentence would have been the same. At that point you realize there are just too many ifs to even think about it. Did you know you were breaking the law? Yeah, I definitely knew that I was breaking the law in smoking, buying the weed, but the actual crime that I was convicted of I had no idea existed, and it wasn't until the 4th or 5th time being questioned, already been in prison for a week, that they told me the name of the charge I was being held for. I didn't see a lawyer until over 40 days had passed, and whilst the embassy could come monthly, they weren't legal experts and weren't allowed to tell me anything about the law. Bro, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.